Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs?
What's up?
Final show of the week. Heading into the weekend. Sundays are my favorite day of the week. I literally almost bought, I almost added Red Zone to my package. Mine's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me, by the way. But I almost added Red Zone to my TV package. But I'm like, it's too late. Too late in the year. Maybe next year. Maybe as a Christmas present to myself.
To yourself.
Yeah. But it's getting to crunch time. There's about 2 to 3 weeks left in your regular seasons. I think 3 weeks left in your regular seasons after this week, right? Or is this week?
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 games.
Yeah.
It's 3 games left because you go to week 15 would be the first playoff game.
So we have 3 games left of the regular season, including this week. And your trade deadlines are most likely this week or next week. And it's getting to crunch time for you to finalize your rosters as well as work towards setting those pristine playoff lineups if you're in the playoffs. So we're going to try to help you with some buys and sells, give you some guys you should get rid of, just throw the side of the road, get you some guys that you should add to your team before the big old playoff run. Before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting, wow. Doing this 3 times. Podcasts and platforms. Leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like and comment down below. And when you do it 3 times, it melts your brain.
Yeah.
3rd time I've done it today. This is Thanksgiving recording. And I'm pretty sure this is the fastest we've ever recorded anything.
Trying.
We've recorded 1 episode. Monday, it took us 4 hours to record 1 episode. And today we've recorded 3.
Yeah.
In about an hour and a half. So, just maybe we should expedite our processes a little bit more.
Maybe a little bit.
Mondays are like recover from Sundays day. It's wild.
Right.
But anyway, let's talk about some buys and sells. We'll talk about the buys first, then jump into the sells. We got some interesting players to talk about. I do have an honorable mention before we do jump in. I do think Travis Etienne is a buy, but I'm not going to add him to the list again because we talked about him last week and he had a bye week this week. So if you get the opportunity to try to buy Travis Etienne, do it. I don't know if Rick agrees or disagrees with that.
I would probably say yes, but I don't know if you can.
Yeah. All right. Buy number 1. This is going to be, I feel like it should be harder to get him, but he has had some interesting weeks the last couple. So we're going to talk about it. Kenny Walker, starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks.
This is a guy you're going to have to buy high, I think.
Yeah. The last week he had 10 rushes for 17 yards, so 1.7 yards per carry. Very, very dismal. And the only thing that really saved him was his 6 catches for 55 yards, which is the most catches and most targets he's ever had in a game. So I actually disagree because I think the last 3 weeks outside of his 27-point game, the person who has him I don't think is super high on him, whereas like, when he first took over the job, week 5, 6, and 7, he was putting up great weeks, and that would have been impossible. I know.
He did have 20.
I know in our league, the guy who has him is going to be like, no, I'm never trading him.
I talked to the guy in our league about him, and he thinks he's the RB1 on his team. So,
yeah. So, he had 13 points against Tampa in week 11. He went into his bye week. He's had, it's one of those stretches of time where he only had 13 points, so it wasn't a big game. And the fantasy the person who has him probably was like, oh, well, it's not a big game. I can get over it. And then he had a bye week. So now it's like all of that excitement that was built up over the course of like 3 or 4 or 5 weeks is now gone. And now they can kind of analyze the player and be like, oh, he had 2.83 in week 8 and 1.7 yards per carry in week 10. Maybe they start thinking about selling him. It's still going to take a lot, but I think this is a good opportunity to buy him now because I think on the season, this is the lowest point he's going to get. He also has a really good matchup against the Raiders this week. He has a matchup against Carolina, Kansas City, the Jets. So there's some matchups in there where he can have some success down the stretch of the season. So I would go and grab Kenneth Walker if you have the opportunity now. But as Rick is about to say, it's going to cost an arm at least.
Yeah. The good news is, even though it's going to cost a lot, I think you're right. You might be able to get away with maybe just an arm instead of an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
Because of the last week and his 1 yard per carry and everything. But he has been electric, and I think he's an RB1. And maybe if you can get him at like high end RB2 price, you might be able to do that depending on who's in your league.
Yeah.
And what their situation looks like. Because let's say the guy who has him already has probably a good running back core, probably drafted him late, and then he, emerged.
Right.
You might be able to get him in that situation. And then you could offer, really good receiver, maybe one of the top tight ends, plus a receiver, plus a running back, whatever package, based on your team needs or their team needs and what your team has.
Right.
And I think you could reasonably get Kenneth Walker. There are going to be some teams who, like the guy in our league, is not willing to trade him at all.
Yeah.
But if the guy is willing to trade him in your league and you need a running back, don't be afraid to trade a lot to go get this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Number 2, this is also going to, cost you an arm, but maybe not an arm and a leg.
Right.
A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles as our number 2 buy. I have him in 3 leagues. 3 leagues.
Gosh.
Almost 4.
He's your guy.
I'm going to do this offseason too. I'm going to spend the entire offseason trading for T.J. Hawkinson.
For who?
T.J.
Oh, it's T.J. Hawkinson.
Hawkinson.
Just so you know, in one of the dynasty leagues we're in, I have A.J. Brown and T.J. Hawkinson. So screw you.
We need to do. What's your record? What's my record in that league?
I'm very bad in that league.
How many picks you want? All of them?
If you give me every single pick you have for the next 10 years, then yeah.
Oh, for the next 10 years, right? Well, anyway, A.J. Brown could buy this week. And if you've had A.J. Brown over the last couple weeks, I'm actually kind of happy I survived the last 2 horrible games from A.J. Brown because I got wins. So I'm waiting for A.J. Brown to save my life at some point. But he, in the last 2 games, has had 1 and 9 fantasy points. And he had 15 against Houston, which it was a wide receiver 2 week, but nothing special in that game. So he's had some of his worst games of the season in the last 2 weeks, and I don't think that's going to continue down the stretch. Green Bay's easy matchup. Tennessee's been an easy matchup. Then you got the Giants, who I think they should be okay with. Last time they played, actually, I think it's the first time they're playing the Giants. And then you got Chicago, Dallas, and New Orleans, who shouldn't be too super difficult for A.J. Brown. But you can buy him based on these 2 tough games because A.J. Brown is hard to own in leagues if you have him because there are just weeks where he's a monster and he'll get 39 points like against Pittsburgh. And then there are weeks where he scores 6 points and you're like, oh my God, I just needed more. I need a little bit more. So A.J. Brown's going through that stretch right now, and I think the frustration will boil over, making A.J. Brown buyable in leagues, and I would put in a big offer for him because he is a top 5 wide receiver, and you need to get him on your team.
Top 5?
Ranked rest of season.
That's interesting.
Who else would you put? You always say that, and then we go through the list, and you're like, oh wait, never mind.
Okay, hold on. Let me look at it.
Oh, he's 6 right now on the rest of season rankings. But
okay,
all right, right now,
D-Hop I would put over him. I would.
Why?
I would put Jamar Chase, who's at 17 right now.
Okay, Jamar Chase is fine, but Hopkins. What about the guys in front of him? Would you put Jalen Waddle over him? Wrong. I would put Tyreek Hill, Stefon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, and Devontae Adams over him, and that's it.
Okay.
And Jamar Chase.
I mean, I guess that's reasonable. Yeah, D-Hop, I don't know. That's debatable.
We can argue about this at another juncture, but AJ Brown.
Yeah, I mean, he is a great buy though right now. I mean, the last 2 weeks he's been really bad, and I think maybe it might be his 2 worst games.
Yeah,
that you're gonna get in a row.
Mm-hmm.
For him, he's got some pretty good matchups coming up. I know Dallas is a little tough, but Green Bay and Tennessee are really great matchups. The Giants are listed as a tough matchup, and they have a good defense, but I wouldn't really stress too much about the Giants.
Yeah.
And Chicago is listed as like an average matchup, but their defense has been significantly worse recently, and it's trending down. So that's going to be a good matchup, I think, by the time they get there. And then the Saints is a good matchup. So outside of really the Dallas game and maybe the Giants game, he's got pretty good matchups rest of the way. He's a boomer bust type of player, I feel like, some weeks, in the sense that like he's gotten 39 points and then he's gotten 1. So like he's had that, but I think his floor is higher than like other boomer bust players, right? Like it's higher than a Gabe Davis or a Mike Williams, and because of that, he's gonna have pretty good weeks the rest of the way. And it is just a good time to buy him, I will say. And even if you want to argue he's wide receiver 6 or wide receiver 7 on the year, whatever rest of the season, he's still wide receiver 1 either way.
Yeah. All right. Finally, we have Keenan Allen of the Los Angeles Chargers. He's had a tough go about it on the season with injuries. You start week 1.
That hammy.
10 points, and then he got a hammy, came back, re-injured it. It's just been tough on the season. The person who drafted him not getting the value in return, obviously. But he finally came back this week, had 68% of the snaps, 8 targets, 5 catches, 94 yards. Keenan Allen-like game. So the big thing for Keenan, he's a PPR machine when he's playing and he's healthy. Great slot receiver. He's buyable for me because right now, like, unless the team who has him is just infatuated with Keenan Allen and has a way too high expectation of him at this point. But I feel like the person that has him on their squad either already traded for him or they held him all year for whatever reason.
Like in an hour league.
And like an hour league. So I do feel like Keenan Allen right now is a great buy because I think he's a wide receiver 1 when he's healthy and producing, and you're not going to have to pay wide receiver 1 costs.
No.
Like we just told you buy AJ Brown. You're paying wide receiver 1 costs regardless of the situation.
Right. I have a question because as someone who might be getting him.
Okay, here we go. Putting it into action.
All right, so he's listed as wide receiver, and I've been going back and forth about that. He's listed as wide receiver 31 rest of season rankings. I don't agree with that. I think that's because of the injuries and everything. Once he goes healthy, up, where would you rank him rest of the season? Top 20. Okay.
Top 20.
Top 20.
Do you want to know the exact spot?
So you would put McLaurin ahead of him?
Yes.
You would put Devontae Smith ahead of him? That he's at 20, so I guess you would have to say Keenan, but unless you think
I wouldn't put Devontae Smith ahead of him.
I was going to say, you thinking, because to me it's not even close. I would rather have Keenan Allen over Devontae Smith.
No, that's not even close for me in my head. It's closer for Terry McLaurin. Like, I honestly maybe might want Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, that one's closer because of the way Heineke treats McLaurin. He's kind of jumped up. But I don't know. Dude, Keenan Allen scares me because of the injuries, and like he could just pull his hammy at any minute, and then they just shut him down.
I mean, this is the risk you run.
But if he's healthy,
what's the trade? Tell me.
And with
I'm not
Williams,
going to try to steal him. I swear.
Okay, well, I'll tell you in a minute. But
I got Pollard.
If he's healthy, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And with Mike Williams kind of battling an injury, but even with Mike Williams in the frame, it doesn't really matter to me. But with Mike Williams out, I think Keenan Allen has the ceiling to be a top 10 receiver.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he was drafted as. He was drafted as like right after CeeDee Lamb and Mike Evans. He was in that range, and I think that's what his ceiling is when he's healthy and playing. and his schedule is really easy.
Yeah.
I mean, Arizona, Raiders, Miami. I know Miami's going to get some corners back, so that could end up being a harder matchup. Tennessee, which right now is one of the worst against receivers. The Colts, that is a tough matchup. That is the only tough matchup he has, though. And then the Rams, which has been this year, has been a good matchup for wide receivers. So
The Rams.
outside of the Colts and then maybe the Dolphins, kind of like AJ Brown, really good matchups. And the next 2 weeks, Cardinals, Raiders, with potentially Mike Williams out. I don't know, man. Sleeper has him right now as a wide receiver 14, and I think that's kind of where I would see him being ranked. So, and you can absolutely get him very cheap right now, based on just the owner being frustrated with him, and his numbers, even when he's played, isn't great. But if you look at it, week 1, he got injured in the second quarter. He had 10 points in the second quarter, and then he gets hurt in week 7. He re-injures his hamstring in the first or the second quarter as well, so he didn't really do anything. And then this week on a limited snap count had 12 fantasy points, and he fumbled. So he really had 14 fantasy points on a limited snap count. Like, I feel like he could explode and be a league winner. To answer your original question, right now there's a trade that was offered to me. It's Dameon Pierce for Keenan Allen, just 1-for-1.
Who are you putting in a running back player?
I got Rachaad White or DeAndre Swift or Jamal Williams.
So you can't start both the Lions running backs.
No, I would just pick one. This week I might go White because he's playing Rachaad White, who Todd Bowles said today that Leonard Fournette is still kind of battling his injury.
Interesting.
And they're playing the Cleveland Browns, so Rachaad White could be a workhorse.
That could really burn you.
I know it could, but it could also elevate. It's one of those trades that, like, it's risky, but it could, it could really elevate.
Anyway, Keenan Allen, bye. Make sure you try to get him on your teams. Let's quickly run through these sells. Number 1, love him. I love this player. And finally, after many moons, after the benching last year at the beginning of the season, after all of the stuff that we've been through with Brandon Ayuk, he is now a stud. He's been really good. Since I traded him, you're welcome, everyone, in week 5, he's had 28, 15, 20, 12, and 16. He's a great player. I'm having a hard time, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm having a hard time right now believing that what Brandon Ayuk has been putting up is sustainable, because the weeks where, like, week 6, 7, 8, and 9, he had 11 targets, and then he dropped to 6 targets, and then he went up to 7 targets, and then he dropped to 4 targets last week. I don't know if that 11 target, 6 target, like, I don't know if that pace where he was getting 11 targets a game can be, like, upheld. Specifically referring to how the San Francisco 49ers play the game of football, and them having so many different options. Like, Ayuk to me is a boomer bust player, and he's been consistent for 5-6 weeks now, but I think there will come a time, especially later in the season here, where he will start to shift into another direction where he becomes less of a, I guess, not a viable option, because he'll always be a good, like, wide receiver, but less of a week-to-week start and more of a guy that has bust weeks a lot more often than not. Similar to like a Mike Williams almost. So I like Brandon Ayuk. I still think he's a great player. And honestly, if you want to hold him and like keep him for the rest of the season, totally fine. This sell and the next sell aren't really sells based on like I think they're going to suck the rest of the way. They're more based on
their value might be at their peak.
Right, the value might be at their peak for the season, so you might as well just sell them now, see if you can get more, and then go from there. So that's what I would do with Brandon Ayuk at this point. I love Ayuk. Still think he's a great player. Still think he can have some success down the stretch and help your fantasy team win, but it might be better for you to cut ties and sell now and get something for him before the trade deadline rather than keep him. Like,
yeah,
if you're trying to get like a superstar running back and you're packaging like Brandon Ayuk up with something and you're really hesitating on selling Brandon Ayuk, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to do it. Let this be a moment where you're like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, because
I would rather have the superstar top 7 running back than Brandon Ayuk.
Right, and I have Ayuk in a dynasty league, so I don't really want to trade him in that league. But if
No,
I
you don't
did
have
have him in redraft, I would be looking to trade him. And I do like the player, but I just feel like there's too many mouths to feed there for him to consistently continue doing what he's doing. This past week, again, 4 targets, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns. Like, that's just not happening again. And with Kittle being as involved as he's been, feels like Debo now is starting to get back into it. He had 23 fantasy points this week. McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, like there's just too much there, and I don't think the touchdowns are going to continue for Ayuk on a weekly basis. And I know against the Chargers he didn't have a touchdown, but 6 catches, 84 yards. I don't even know if he does that, right? So I think there's going to be some games where he still does good, and he'll get a touchdown, and he'll maybe have a couple big catches. And I don't think he's going to suck rest of season, but I don't think he's going to be like right now. He's wide receiver 16. I don't think he probably finishes in the top 20 for me, but still a good player, still a good flex, I think. But right now his value is just a little inflated.
Okay, let's quickly talk about the last 2 guys. Number 2 is Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. This one's harder for me because I love Tony Pollard.
Yeah,
I really do. And I want him to be the guy for the Cowboys. And he is literally one Zeke injury away from like being the guy and being a superstar. And like I just in fantasy football, you can't rely on injuries. You can't rely on like situations like that happening and being like, oh well, I'm going to hold on to Tony Pollard because if he ends up being really good. If Zeke ends up getting hurt, he'll be really good. And it's like, that's the risk you run. Like if you hold him and you're just getting 10 points a game or 9 points a game or 8 points a game, like you were getting earlier in the season, then that's fine. The big thing about Pollard is that earlier in the season, he was doing that. He was only getting 6, 7, 8 points a game. He would have the occasional touchdown that put him over like the 14, 15 point threshold. When Zeke went down, he started going bananas and having a lot of really good games. And then Zeke came back this week and he still had a monster game. And I think a lot of people looked at that and was like, oh, he saved me a fantasy week. Like, amazing. The problem with Tony Pollard is that I don't think Zeke is going to get less work. He's only going to get, at minimum, split with Tony Pollard. And so with that being said, it's Tony Pollard can't keep producing the fantasy numbers that he's producing while splitting the work. He still has value. He's still a flex-worthy play on a week-to-week basis. He's still a guy that'll probably get 12 points a week. But he's not a guy that's going to get 30 points, 25 points, 20 points on a week-to-week basis. It's just not going to happen. So now is your time to cut ties, sell him at the high ceiling that people see him at over the last 3 or 4 weeks with all those, big productive performances. Sell him based on that and try to get something in return for him. It blows. I'm okay with keeping him. I'm probably going to keep him on my roster rest of season in the home league. But if you want to sell him, like I said, similar to Brandon Ayuk, if you have a deal where you got him and another player and you're going to get a stud in return, don't let trading Tony Pollard like stop you from getting a stud on your team. Like trade him.
Yeah, I feel like Pollard is he it's a tough one because if Zeke, like you said, if Zeke gets hurt, then he probably will continue what he's doing, or at least close to it. Right. And he'll be an RB1 rest of the way. But the way it's constructed is just not going to continue at the level that it is right now. Yeah. And because of that, he is a great trade asset, especially coming off a 36-point week. Even if Zeke was tore his ACL, does Pollard get another 36-point week rest of the season? I don't know. That's so. No. A lot of fantasy points. So it is a fantastic time to trade him. And then also you could use the pitch too, like of what you were saying, where it is tough because Zeke, he's already good on with Zeke, and with a Zeke injury, he could be getting 30 points a week. So like you can use that as a selling pitch to teams as well. And I think you could get a lot for Pollard right now if you traded him in some leagues. So I think it is a good time to trade him. But if you want to hold on to him too, that's fine. I think he could be a good flex down the stretch as well.
Agreed. Rick, why don't you tell us why Curtis Samuel is a sell this week? We already kind of talked about this already, so on our last show, so we can make this one quick. But give me one.
Yeah, we kind of just mentioned like he's a good start this week against Atlanta, but after that, not great. He has his bye week coming up still, and ever since Heineke's been in there, Samuel has not been getting a lot of targets. Really since week 8, 4 targets, 2 targets. It's going down. Jahan Dotson also has come back. And he's not taking a huge workload at all, but he's just like another receiver in the mix. It seems like Heineke's guys, McLaurin, he's forcing the ball a lot. He's getting almost 10 targets a week. And nobody else is really even getting like 5 targets a week. Heineke also dumps it off to running backs too. So if it's McLaurin's not there, he'll dump it off or he'll run. Like that's just kind of how it is with him, or he just chucks it down the field. But so it's kind of hurting Samuel a little bit. So the fantasy production that we saw in the beginning of the season is definitely slowing down in a big way, and especially last couple of weeks where he's still putting up okay numbers and startable numbers, but if you kind of dig deeper, he's really not producing at a high level. And I think it's probably your best time to trade him either now or maybe if you want to wait a week. I think you might be able to get away with that because he's playing Atlanta this week, but it's a good time to do him.
I would say to add to that, you see a decrease in snap percentage over the last 4 weeks. He had 74, 75, 64, 60, and you've also seen a decrease in target share, 4, 4, 4, and 2 over the last 4 weeks. So since week 7, he's kind of lost that sheen, that like wide receiver 1 sheen that Rick was in love with. But he had 10, 17, 6, and 9. So it's like the fantasy point production is still kind of there where it's like, oh, well, he's not going to hurt me that bad. When the reality is that a drop in the actual opportunity share that he's gotten has, resulted in that situation. I will say he also gets rushing work, small amounts of it. So, you have to keep that in mind when you're trading him as well. But I don't think like Rick said, I don't think he has an easy game left on the schedule. He has, 2 games against the Giants, a game against San Francisco, a game against Cleveland. So like the game against Cleveland should be a little bit easier, but everything else is kind of tough. After this Atlanta game, like you got to sell him. And hopefully he has a big game. Like I would try to sell him even before that because like he is a start for us this week, but I'm scared. So anyway, so Curtis Samuel. Anything else you have to say?
No, I think that's it.
All right, there you go. Week 12, buys and sells in the books. I'm excited for the week. I'm excited for the week this week and to watch football on Sunday and to get a win in fantasy. Hopefully you guys get a win in your leagues. See you later.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.